this is the solution of the previous activity where you have to toggle the LEDs, so power on only one LED at a time when you press the push button. So I'm going to remove that, and first of all, well, we are just going to write the configuration code, okay? So the import lines, the GPIO setup, etc. So we are going to import rpi.gpio again as GPIO, import time library that we are going to use, and then as usual GPIO.setMode with GPIO.bcm, finally GPIO.cleanup, and now we are going to create variables, okay, one variable for each LED and push button just to know the number of those components. So let's, for example, use LED1 pin, which is 17, then LED2 pin 27, and LED3 pin 22. We also have the button pin, which is 26. Okay, so that is very important. Make sure you have the correct numbers. Okay, the number should be exactly the one that you have used to connect the wire, okay, for each component. Now here let's do GPIO.setup with LED1 pin. Let's make it GPIO.out, so as an output GPIO. Okay, we do the same here for LED2, and we do the same for LED3, and then GPIO.setup button pin GPIO.in for the push button. Okay, so that is the end of the configuration. Okay, that's quite a few lines, but it's just the basic stuff to set the GPIOs as input or output. And now we can actually use the GPIOs. So first I'm going to initialize the state of all three LEDs, okay, just to be sure. So GPIO output LED1 in GPIO.low. Okay, we want to power off all the LEDs. So let's do that. Great. So now it is the mode is initialized and the state is also initialized. So now we arrive at the core functionality of the program, and here is where you may have a different solution than the solution I proposed here, and that is completely okay. If you have a solution that is clear, that is clean, and that works well, no problem with that. My solution is only one possible solution. So as I previously told you, I'm going to create a previous button state variable, okay, and I'm going to show you how we use it in the while loop. So I'm going to do GPIO input button. Okay, we need to initialize that variable with a first value. So I'm going to use that previous button state variable to check the current button state with the previous button state and see when we switch from GPIO low to GPIO high. So now I'm going to write while true. Okay, we are going to just do a while true like we did before. Okay, so we can continue monitoring the button state and always make sure that the program is running. And first I'm going to do time.sleep 0.01. Okay, so we make that while loop run at 100 Hz, or in other words, 100 times per second. And the time sleep, you can add it at the end of the code or at the beginning. Here it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to add it at the beginning so we are sure that first we don't forget it, and second, it is correctly indented. Right, so now I'm going to do what? I'm going to read the button state. GPIO input button pin. So I read the button state, and now what I need to do is I need to compare the button state with the previous button state. Okay, so let's say the button state was high and now it is low, so it will be different. So I'm going to check if the button state is different from the previous button state, and as you can see here, of course, we have access to previous button state because it is in a more global scope. Okay, that's why we have declared it here. So if the current button state, which I just call button state, is different from the previous one, it means that we are either going from low to high or high to low. So either we press the button or we release the button. And the first thing I'm going to do here is actually to set previous button state to the current button state. Okay. So why do I do that? Well, simply because when the state is different, you want to, of course, update the previous state with the current state, so you don't always enter that if. Okay. You just want to check when the state is going from low to high once or high to low once. So you need to keep a variable previous button state, and every time you fill it with the button state when it has changed. So let's say it was low and now here you read it's high. So you will enter that if, because the condition will be true, different, and then the previous button state will be high, okay, which means that the next time we enter the while loop, if the button state is still high, then this won't work and we don't enter that if. Okay. Now what I can do is, because here we have two cases, either it's low to high or high to low. So I'm simply going to check with another if the button state, so the current one, is GPIO high. And with that, we only check the condition from low to high. So when I enter this if here, this block of code, I know that the button has just been pressed. And this structure here with the previous state and checking the previous and the current state is actually quite common, okay, in robotics or when you want to deal with hardware stuff. It's good that you see that now because you will encounter that many times in the future. Okay, so now that we know that here we want to toggle the LEDs, now we have to focus on the LEDs. So actually we need to kind of have keep a state, okay, for the LEDs, because we need to know when we should switch to LED 1 or LED 2 or LED 3. What I'm going to do is add here index, let's say LED index 0. Let's put it to 0, and we are going to say that if the LED index is 0, okay, then we are going to power, I'm just putting some comments now, power on LED 1, okay, and set the LED index to 1, okay, and then I have if LED index equals 1, so make sure you have the double equal. Okay, when you assign a variable, just 1 equal. When you test a variable, 2 equal. Then power on LED 2, LED index is equal to 2, and else we're going to power on LED 3 and say that the LED index is going back to 0. Okay, so what did I do here? Well, this is basically a simple state machine. Okay, we start with a state which is 0, okay, just to represent the index of LEDs, let's say 0, 1, and 2. And when it is 0, so we enter that while. When it is 0, then we are going to power on the LED 1 and set the LED index to 1, okay? So then if this is true, the elif and the else will not be executed, all right? So after we have powered on the LED 1, we go back here, we go back to the while loop, okay? And once the user has pressed the button again, then we enter that if again, and now LED index is 1. So we are not going to execute that block of code. We are going to execute that block of code, okay, and power on LED 2, and then set the LED index to 2. So next time we press the button, we go inside the if again, and LED index is not 0, it's not 1, so we go to the else, and it is where we can power on LED 3 and of course set the LED index to 0. So next time we go back to the first condition. All right, so to power on the LED 1, it's simple. I'm going to do GPIO output LED 1 pin GPIO.I. And of course, what I also need to do is to power off the other LED, okay? Because if I don't ask to power off the other LED, if they were powered on, then they will not be powered off just by themselves, okay? GPIO low, and let's also do that for LED 3. Okay, and now to power on LED 2, it's the same. So I'm just going to paste that, but instead of here I'm going to put low, and here I'm going to put high, and the same for LED 3. I'm going to put low here and high here. Okay, so you can see the first time we have high, low, low, and then low, high, low, and then low, low, high, and then going back to high, low, low, etc. Well, it seems that the code is finished. Let's try that. Let's see if we have any error, okay, because I haven't checked for errors yet. So let's run the code. Let's name it activity 6. So as you can see, first all of the LEDs are powered off. Now I'm going to press on the button once, and as you can see, the first LED is powered on. If I press again, the second LED is powered on. I press the third, and I press again, going back to the first one. If I keep pressing the button without releasing the button, then nothing changes, okay, right? And when I release the button, also nothing changes. It's only when I actually press the button, so when the button state is going from low to high, that we are changing the powered on LED.